Welcome to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Hey, that's me. Hi, and welcome to Positive Talk. Our show features the best positive stories and people from around the globe as we endeavor to answer the universal question of why am I here and what is my purpose? Understanding that can change everything, and knowing your greatness is fundamental to living your best life. So join us right now as together we work to create the adventure of our lifetime. And welcome to Positive Talk for another day, and I'm glad you're here. We've got a great show for you today. We've got a very interesting guest, and no, it's not this lovely young lady here. This is Rochelle, and she has worked tirelessly to make sure that this guest gets on and stuff. So, Rochelle, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Kevin. Thank you for having me here. I'm very excited for the show. I know everybody who comes on is very unique, but it continues to happen every single show we have. So,
Well, and I've got a new challenge for you as well. And
okay,
that is if we need the internet for any particular reason, I'm going to have you look stuff up for us. Is that okay?
totally. Let's do it.
All right, Dean. So let's introduce our guest for the hour. And I'm going to say Shawn Leon is here, and he's got a Nowotnik. Is that close?
Nowotnik.
Dang it!
Nowotnik.
I knew I would screw that up. Nowotnik.
That's okay. Yeah, don't worry about it. My whole life I've experienced this. So
Yeah. I mean, we talked about that. Changing your name would offend mom and dad, and then we just can't have that.
yeah, dropping the last name just doesn't go over well with your parents.
No, especially your dad. It's his given name.
Yes.
And since you're a son, you get to produce more children along the Nowotnik line or whatever that is, and so it's important. Nowotnik, right?
Yes, you
There
got
you
it.
go. Good
You
job,
got it.
Kevin.
It's so stressful doing what I do, coming up with last names. It's so hard. It's so hard. But in any event, you're one of those people that you're kind of, not very busy because you're a therapist, and you do film, and you do music, and you do all kinds of different things. I don't know how you have enough time to do all of that stuff. And we're going to go over the list of your people that you've met in like Hollywood. Hey, I wonder what they're going to call it now that the Hollywood sign is burned down.
That I do not know. I don't even want to touch that. But yeah, I feel bad for those people. It's terrible what's going on there.
It really is. So you are in the mighty town of Chicago. Chicago. It's a beautiful place, Chicago.
Yeah, I'm just outside of it, a few miles, but everyone knows Chicago, so I say I'm from the suburbs of Chicago, which is true. So yeah, it's a wonderful city.
It's got a lot of opportunities, lots of different things there, and then they've also got the other part that we're not going to talk about, because this is, after all, Positive Talk. So tell us a little bit about yourself, young man. How did you get started? You were in Hollywood, and then now you're a therapist, and you're doing all kinds of stuff. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you did all this.
Well, okay, I'll give you the really short version of it. So I got hurt playing football in high school, and I thought, well, what way am I going to be able to meet girls now? Because now I'm not playing football. So I was like, well, I can't sing, I can't play piano, I can't play drums. I will get a guitar, and I will become a rock star, and then I will get the girls. So I was self-taught as a musician, not very good, couldn't read music, but it turns out that at the time I was doing music, there was this thing called alternative grunge, which I didn't know I fit into. I thought I was in a hard rock / punk band, and I wound up getting a record deal, a production deal. So not one of those big deals where they give you millions of dollars up front. It's pretty much where they put you in a studio, you kind of go there every day, you rehearse, you record, and when they finish an album, they sell it off to another record label or they release it themselves. But you're not in any debt, but you also don't get all the fancy cars and stuff right away. So long story short, right before my album was supposed to come out, the band was dropped. Yay, exciting. That was awesome. And I find myself with a young son struggling. So I come from a blue collar family, multi-generation blue collar family, and I already knew how to weld and machine. So I got a job in a steel factory to pay my ways. But I was miserable, not because I was better than the people there or better than the work. It just wasn't my calling. I was a creative person and I missed the creativity. So one day I hatched this brilliant idea, and I was blissfully unaware of how difficult this challenge would be. I said, I'm going to go to Hollywood and start a talent agency. And this was the advent of the internet in around 97. So the internet was kind of 95-ish, but people were just really starting to get on it in 97. And I was the first person to really look at the internet as a ability to have a one-stop shop, to have models, actors, actresses, producers, everything that I learned about in the music industry, everything I knew about Hollywood, put it all in one package and try to change the world. And that's how I wound up in Hollywood, blissfully unaware of what I set myself up for.
Which was?
Well, a lot of no's at first, but I will tell you, I was fairly lucky. Of course, I think we make our own luck in some ways, but the first day I went to Hollywood, I called a friend. I said, you got to come out here. We're starting a talent agency. By the way, you're going to be the vice president of this, of this company. So he liked that because he's going to get a business card that said, vice president. So that sounds really, really awesome. And my first night in Hollywood, I was at a restaurant, Spago, which is a real hot spot at that time, and Wolfgang Puck's restaurant. And my friend says, if you can meet any celebrities right now and we could pitch our business to them, who would it be? And I said, well, Tony Curtis, because I like Some Like It Hot and I like old movies. Harrison Ford, because I grew up watching Indiana Jones, and Sean Connery. Would you believe it or not? 2 of those 3 guys came into that restaurant that night.
So, Shawn showed up, did he?
Yes, he did. You know what? He was not as friendly as I had hoped. He wasn't really embracing me with all the love. But I will tell you, Tony was a sweetheart. Tony Curtis was a sweetheart. He wound up, I made friends with a producer from Warner Brothers, and he sat at my table, and we started talking. He's like, I know Tony. I was like, really? He's like, yeah, I'll have him come over and sit with us for a while. So we got some champagne. Tony orders this steak tartare. I don't know if you know what this is, but I was so green. I didn't know what this is. So they're ordering this appetizer, and this raw plate of meat shows up with a couple of quail eggs. And I'm like, oh, okay, I don't know what this is. I'm, not in Chicago anymore. So I guess this is what they eat here.
Raw meat. You don't have raw meat in LA.
Yeah, so it was really, I got lucky. So the first day I was there, I had already networked with people, and I just went from there and just kept building on it.
That's remarkable. It really is. And for those of us who may be under, like 35, Tony Curtis at one time was an A-list celebrity, and he did movies in the 50s and 60s, and he was in Spartacus as an example, and many really, really cool movies. And I'm saying this for Brachelle's benefit because I don't think you know who he is.
I actually do, thanks to my grandma.
Oh wow, I'm in the same category as grandma now, but thank you.
It's pretty remarkable. We think that when people are stars, that they're really famous and stuff, that they're going to be famous and it's going to go, they're going to be legends and stuff. But I've asked kids that are in their 30s, do you know who Bob Hope is? Now, keep in mind that Bob Hope was in his day a really, really big celebrity, and he went and did a lot of things overseas for the troops and stuff. Brachelle, do you know who Bob Hope was?
You got me there, Kevin. I'm so sorry.
But that's my point, is that fame, what do they say? Fame is fleeting.
Yes, and he lived 100 years too.
I know.
It's like 99 or 100 when he finally passed. And I actually met Bob. I met him at the Beverly Hills Hotel, And it was him and Milton Berle, which you can imagine for me, it was like I was in a time warp. I was like, for one, I didn't know they were still alive because they were already in their 90s. And I was like, they both get off an elevator and I'm just standing there. I'm like, Mr. Hope, it's so nice to meet you. And, and it was just, it was just surreal, like, because it was, for one, I didn't know they were alive. So then it's really surreal because I was like, oh my God, they're up from the dead, like.
Was Milton Berle smoking a cigar by chance?
He had one, but he was not smoking it because at that time, I think they were pretty much done with smoking inside. And because California was the first place where they banned smoking indoors.
Yeah. So Milton Berle, for those of you who don't know, was a television. He was the Johnny Carson before Johnny Carson was the Johnny Carson.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got to go. He was the Jay Leno before Johnny Carson was Johnny Carson before Milton Berle back in the 50s. And
yeah, they called him Mr. TV, Uncle Milty.
Uncle Milty, that's exactly right. And so you have had, I'm looking at and this is one of the things that we got stuck on when we were doing our pre-meeting, is that you have met some of the most remarkable people in Hollywood, and there are pictures on your website, which if you go to, where can they go to find his pictures, young lady?
Shawn Leon. No. Wait. Wait.
Nowotnik.
Nowotnik.
We'll get it. We got an hour to get this.
There was no Nowotnik. It was a Nowotnik. That's what it was. It was a Nowotnik.
All right. Well, I'm definitely dropping the last name after today. So this is going to be, my publisher is not going to be happy because all the books are going to have to be thrown in the dumpster, and it's just going to be Shawn Leon from here on out.
And so he met people like Nick Nolte, who appears to look sober in this picture.
He was, yeah. Nick is a cool guy. He's a survivor.
Yeah, he's been around for a long time. Katy Perry, I'm sure, and Sir Paul McCartney, I'm sure you know. You better know him, or I'm going to fire you. Tom Hanks. Yeah. You know Paul McCartney, right?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. only from my referencing him, probably.
No, actually, I do know who that is.
Greatest songwriter of all time, So
yeah, and without question, the one of the best of all time. He's in the category of like Beethoven and Bach and all them guys, and stuff. So you've met all these people. What's it like when you get to meet all these people and they're willing to stand still and take a picture with you and them?
Well, it's really interesting because at first I grew up as a kid watching, some of these people on TV and of course hearing them on the radio and seeing them in the big screen. So at first it was like, this is unbelievable. Like, I had a little bit of an experience in the music industry where people would stop in the studio when we were recording and there'd be like really big people and musicians showing up and they'd be sitting outside watching us record. And that was a pretty cool feeling to look over there and be like, oh my God, that's a guy in Guns N' Roses. He's checking us out right now. Like, that's pretty awesome, right? Like, so I did have a little taste of that early on, but I was blown away. Of course, I took pictures with everyone because like no one's going to believe me that I'm in Hollywood actually doing this back then because there wasn't social media in '97, nothing that was really effective. And so I'd have to, clip these photos and, show people what I'm up to, and they could live vicariously through me, especially my mother, and my family and stuff like that. So I was blown away, and I will say this: I had a really good experience for 17 years. I think there's maybe a handful of people who I would not mention that were not nice, and maybe they just were having a bad day. But I really was lucky. That being said, I wasn't running up to them on the streets. I was on the red carpet at the Oscars or in the Golden Globes parties or at the Grammys, which I was a member. So I had really cool access, and the people that would come to hang out with other celebrities were, super cool and chill as well. And they were, for instance, I met Sir Richard Branson because he flew in just to see Paul McCartney. And I was there to see Paul McCartney with about 1,000 other people, private event, charity event. And So it was the first time, by the way, I flew Virgin Air. So I actually had back then I still had, I still had the pass in my pocket because I had just got off the plane. And I said, Sir Richard, like, best experience I ever had in my life flying your airline. And I showed him, my receipt from flying. And we had a great conversation. Couldn't be a nicer guy, just could not be nicer. So my experience has always been really positive, to the point. So the photos you're seeing is just as I'm telling you, is less than 1% of the photos I have. I have pictures of people at dinner, sleeping at my house. Nothing weird, by the way, I should clarify that. But, people would sometimes crash at my place because they didn't want to stay at a hotel and be bothered by people. Because I live a little bit outside the sticks, where I won't mention where I live now, because people will start showing up thinking Katy Perry's going to be here next week or something, or Taylor Swift. But yeah, so it was really cool. So sometimes my neighbors would be like, they'd see me driving down the street and they'd be scratching their head like, what does that guy do again? Like, wasn't that so-and-so in his car driving by? So that was fun. That kind of stuff was really fun to have those kind of experiences.
And you got to meet people like Kim Kardashian. Now, I'm curious, was this before she got her new butt, or was this afterwards?
I'm not sure when the butt changed, if it did change or not, but it was always pleasant to me. And Kim is, I will say this, Kim is one of these people, I cannot give her enough credit how articulate this woman is. I think there's some people who play a character sort of like Paris Hilton to the cameras and on. These people are sharp. I mean, they are sharp, especially like Kim. You don't become a billionaire or on the verge of being a billionaire if she's not already, being a dummy. Like, she knows what she's doing. Like, she is very articulate, very kind, and I can tell you, super humble. Someone that everyone is trying to clamor to. I met her a few times at the Golden Globes, and then I met her. One of the pictures is from a charity event. I couldn't even tell you what the event is anymore. And she just couldn't be any more gracious and nice and polite and beautiful, like just generally beautiful.
And John Edward, the psychic medium, he did a reading for her, and he says the same exact thing. She was just a wonderful human being, and most of these people are. There are a few, I suppose, that get real full of themselves, but then there are people that don't have any reason to get full of themselves, and they are. So I guess it works out.
Yeah, I think I can tell you, just even when I will probably say the first year I rubbed elbows in Hollywood, I was walking real tall, and I would go through my little town and I'd be like, do you know who I am? Like, of course no one knows who I am. I'm the guy in the shadows of the talent. I'm not the talent, but I felt, really powerful being in that, there was an aura of success being around these people.
And the one thing that I do like to tell, or have you explain a little bit, is that very few of us ever get, we watch the Oscars and we watch the Grammys and all that, and we get to see the red carpet and we get to see all the people on the red carpet and stuff, but very few of us ever get to actually be on the red carpet, let alone sitting down at a table full of celebrities and which you also did, I understand. So what's it like? Is it humbling? Do you feel like you belong? I can't imagine.
So I did feel like I belonged after a while, but the thing is, what I like most about it was the energy of, I need to do more. I need to step up my game. Again, we shouldn't, look at external motivation of why we should be better. I just felt like I wanted to step up my game when I was around these people. Like, when you're in a room and you get to talk to Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, and then, you walk over and you high five Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, and then, you turn around and there's someone other big name there, and you're like, I got to step up my game. And these people, they started, Spielberg, I mean, Jaws was almost the end of his career. He had so many problems with that. Matt and Ben with Good Will Hunting. When I first met them, they were, and they still are, because I ran into Matt a while ago, still very humble. But I was telling Matt, I said, you're going to win the Golden Globe. You're going to win the Oscar. And for Good Will Hunting, this is just a phenomenal film, one of my favorite films. And of course, Robin Williams was in it. And I told Robin the same thing. And And of course they won, which I have no part in, but and I'm sure I wasn't the only one who thought they were going to win at the time as well. But they were just great. But no, so I will tell you how I became comfortable and feeling like I fit in. Is I read this book, Catch Me If You Can.
Oh, but now hold on. I want you to tell that story when we come back because we need to take a quick break. So we're talking with Shawn, Leon, and Rochelle.
Why does it keep leaving my head? Nowotnik. Nowotnik?
Yes, thank you,
Nowotnik.
Michelle.
I just
I'll
like
have
to
it
play.
perfect by the end.
Yes, indeed. We'll be right back. Are you looking for a powerful way to grow your brand while making a real difference? Well, Positive Talk is the perfect platform to align your message with inspiration, hope, and meaningful conversations. By sponsoring Positive Talk, your brand will reach an engaged audience that values positivity and connection. People who want to support companies that share their values. Take this opportunity to showcase your business in a space that uplifts, inspires, and creates lasting impact. Don't wait. Email me, Kevin at kmmedia.pro today to learn how you can partner with us and spread positivity while growing your brand. And welcome back to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. And Rochelle is sitting in with us today, and Shawn Leon Nowotnik. No, I'm so sorry.
Nowotnik.
Yes, thank you, Michelle.
Thank you so. And actually, we're having more fun with your name, kind of because we can. But it's a cool name. I really like it.
Well, thank you. It's
We'll keep
I'm
it.
sure with a name like McDonald, you don't get too many people screwing that up. So
No, but a lot of people say, "Can I get fries with that?" when they say my name.
Yeah, I'm sure you get a lot of jokes, or they just assume that you're a billionaire, right? That you own the entire company.
Oh no, they've seen me dress. They know better than that.
Oh, okay.
But they do say, "Why isn't your name Ronald?" So it's just one of those things. But we're talking about you, but I want to make sure. Oh, tell the story before we go on to the next thing.
Oh, so the book Catch Me If You Can was the first book I read cover to cover as a kid. And this gave me the confidence. Of course, I don't suggest that any of your listeners should become thieves or bank crooks or any of this kind of stuff. But the psychology of the book taught me that if we believe in ourselves, whatever role we put ourselves in, so basically we imagine what narrative we want to live, we can convince others that we belong. So when you talk about fitting into Hollywood, well, just act. It was very easy. Just act like you really don't care that you're there. And it's an inconvenience to be there, and everyone leaves you alone. If you act all, like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing ever, people are like, who is that person? They don't belong here. So Catch Me If You Can kind of give me that psychology to say, I can be anyone I want to, and I'm going to, and I'm gonna do that and live my own life and live my own narrative.
For those of you who don't know that book, which was turned into a movie, you should watch either one of those things because it really is interesting that he decided he was going to be a pilot, and so he placed an order with Pan Am or one of the airlines for a uniform, and nobody ever questioned him. It was amazing, and I forget his name. Do you remember his name?
Yeah, it's Frank Abagnale Jr.
That's right. That's right. He was on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. Johnny Carson was the host before Jay Leno, and then now I don't even know who the host is now.
I think it's what is his name? Oh gosh, he's from Saturday Night Live, but I don't remember his name. Jimmy something. No, Jimmy Fallon.
Jimmy Fallon. That's right.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And but when he was on, it was a funny story. When he was on the Tonight Show, and he said that he was at a nightclub in a hotel, and he met a beautiful woman there, and it turns out she was an expensive call girl, and so they negotiated for her to go up to his room for $1,000. Well, he didn't have any money. What he had were checks. And so they get up to the room, and he says, well, I got to go down and cash this check. and it was a cashier's check for $1,400, but it was fake. And so she said to him, well, they're not going to cash it at this time of night, but just sign the check over to me. And he said, but it's $1,400 and we agreed on $1,000. So she gave him $400, and then she got a bad check that she wasn't able to cash anyway. So that's the kind of thing that was in that book or the movie.
Yeah, I wasn't doing that stuff.
No, you were being upfront and honest with people.
Well, as honest as I could be. I wasn't telling them that I was flying from a steel factory, to start a talent agency when I first got there. I didn't. That was an omission I left out. That, by the way, the guy you're talking to is actually working in a steel factory during the week. But
now, is that part of the mystique that you have to create for yourself? Did you have to feel like that you created a mystique that talking to all these famous people was no big deal, and I can get you work if you want to come and sign with me and that kind of stuff? Is that just a mentality you have to have?
So yeah, I think so. And the other thing is, I was really selling the idea of the whole company as an idea of possibly get, an IPO, because this was the gold rush of, the internet, right? Where everything was being bought and sold. And so my thing was just to get some major backers. But yeah, the confidence I think I've always felt confident talking to people. So that was never really a problem for me. So, my mouth has gotten me in a lot of trouble, but it's also opened a lot of doors. But it's 50-50, I would say. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Well, and you've written several books, and as part, not like you don't have anything else to do, but you're a therapist and you're an author, and you worked in Hollywood as a talent guy for a number of years. How do you have so much time, or so little time, I must say?
Well, time management is probably the number one thing that most people have to work on. And we're terrible at managing our time because we're procrastinators. We get on social media. I won't name any certain ones, but people just keep flipping on it. Every 15 seconds, there's something new, and they flip on it and flip on it. And then they go down this hole for hours. Rather than doing that, I tend to just take out a notepad and write down my goals and what I need to work on. And I'm constantly chasing those things. I feel very unfulfilled if I'm not working on something or towards something. It almost causes anxiety. So yeah, it's a balance. But I love, the other thing is I love what I do. So like I do therapy, and that's about 30 hours a week to 40 hours a week at my clinic outside of in St. Charles, Illinois. And then I'm a night owl, so I write books at night. And so that no one bothers me. Everyone's sleeping, and I can just focus. And that's really when I find my rhythm. Everything else is, now I take it if I have the time. Before I would do any job that would come my way just because I wanted to work. And now I'm a little more particular of what's the cost of this, meaning my time, right? Our most valuable commodity next to our health is time, because we don't know how much we have. So it's just really looking at my time as a commodity and how I'm going to best spend it. And there's certainly other things I wish I could do. Right now, I'm busy promoting this book, and but there's a film I really want to work on this year, and if I can manage it, I will, even if I have to push off the next book for a little bit of time. So again, it's a time management thing.
So let's go through this, because your books are all worth having. The first one was Louder Than Bombs. What's that one about?
So the first two books I did are basically tools. So Louder Than Bombs and Mighty Words for Mighty Women. I don't want to give them too much time because they're books that I curated. So they're quotes by famous people that would inspire my patients. So I would use these. I used to come to the group meetings or individual therapy and write a quote on the board and try to tie it in with what the lesson is or what a client can learn, especially if they couldn't see the light, if there's any hope. And I found that this was a really effective way. So I decided to publish these two books so that other therapists could use them in group settings and individual therapy. People like my sister use it in schools to inspire students, and then people who need daily affirmations. So those were my first forays into publishing. And then I segued where I knew I was capable of writing, because I had written some treatments for screenplays, and I always wanted to write a book. And that's when I wrote Habits of Successful People, which is loosely based on my time in Hollywood. Now, it's not a story about Hollywood at all, but what it is people like Richard Branson and Kim Kardashian and you name them. I quote them in the book. I used to carry around these little note cards, these note cards without lines on them, and I'd ask people questions like, what inspires you? What motivates you? What's your secret to success? And I would write these things down, and I had a drawer full of them. And one day I was like, why am I not putting these in a book? So I wrote these different habits, and it's all micro chapters. So it's 3 to 4 pages per chapter. There's 48 lessons in the book, and each one comes from a different celebrity or historic figure or someone in the business world who's really set the world on fire. And yeah, that was the focus of that book.
Well, Shawn, when we come back, and by the way, that book again is Habits of Successful People. Run out and get that one, because that would be fun. One of the things that we do is we take little sayings and we put them on T-shirts. When we come back from this break, I would love for you to tell Rochelle one that isn't copyrighted that we can use and put on a T-shirt that's your favorite quote. Can we do that?
I will try my best.
We'll be right back.
You're listening to Brushwood Media Network, the best in syndicated talk, news, and entertainment shows.
As you go about your daily life, look closer. As you gather with family and friends who love and support you, look closer. There are youth right in your community who don't have the home, warmth, and healing you have. So look closer. Every year across America, a staggering 4.2 million youth are homeless or trafficked. And for 50 years, Covenant House has worked relentlessly to keep them safe and protected. Tonight, 2,000 young people will sleep safely in a Covenant House bed. And tomorrow, they will wake up surrounded by love. They get clean clothes, hot meals, medical care, and a safe place to sleep. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In sites across America to help them fulfill the great promise of their lives. So look closer at Covenant House. To help or get help, go to covenanthouse.org.
And welcome back to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. And Rochelle is here, and she's got, I don't want to put any pressure on you, Shawn, but she's got a paper and pencil, and she's going to write this down, your favorite quote that came from either one of your books or not one of your books, that we can put on a T-shirt and call it the Shawn Leon Nowotnik. Yes. Perfect.
Well, I will send you a quote from my book, but I actually thought of a quote that I thought would be fun to put on it, because I'm going to put this on the wall of my clinic in my office. And it is public domain now. It's from Winnie the Pooh. And it's the quote. I love this quote because it's really inspirational. It says, "You are braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, smarter than you think, and love more than you'll ever know." And I just think I find that really inspirational for my clients, and it's public domain, so you won't get sued, which is really awesome, right? Because none of us want to be sued.
And we're not into getting sued.
No. So, but I would be very happy to email you one of my quotes, which I don't really have like a tag phrase that I constantly say to people, but I do have a couple in my books that I could send you, and I would be flattered if you even printed one shirt with my quote on it and wore it. So I feel like I'm changing the world.
We can do that. We can do that. You know, one of my favorite quotes of all time came from a movie that you wouldn't think that a really dynamic quote would come from. It came from the movie Braveheart. Do you remember that movie?
Yeah, of course. Mel Gibson. And his father was, dead, and he was lying next to him, and his father turned his head to him and said, "Your heart is free. Have the courage to follow it." And I wouldn't have thought that would have come out of
that script, but it did, and it was to me, it's one of my favorite quotes, because if you follow your heart and you have the courage to do it, then you can do great things, just like you are.
Well, thank you. And to piggyback off of that is, so what you're talking about is narrative. So, right, like to follow our heart is, a lot of people don't realize this. And by the way, this comes from my other book that if you want to talk about, we can talk about, but which is F Happiness. But I talk about narrative, and most of us do not live our own narrative, right? We've been conditioned since we've been in school, like how to act, how to walk, how to sit, how to think. Then our parents influence us as best as they try to be great parents. Being a parent is a learning process. We're not all perfect at it. And then we have these jaded ideas of who we are. And then we're told we're the smart kid, or we're the dumb kid, or the good brother, or the bad brother, or the good sister, or the bad sister. And we take this and we run with that narrative, and we never really question, who are we really, and what is our authentic self? And so that's one of the big things I talk about in this new book is authentic self. And that goes back to your heart, right? Like, what is your authentic self? We have so many people living other people's lives or versions of themselves. And that's really sad, because here's the other thing is, life is about the relationships we have, right? And so if we don't know who we are authentically, how can we be vulnerable with somebody and have a really deep relationship with them? We can't unless we're authentic. And then therefore we have to know what our narrative is, or as you would say, Kevin, you have to follow your heart. And so I look at it, when you say that, that's what I think of.
Well, yeah, because that's in your mind, in your world. See, one of the things that we talk about is follow your passion. Why are you really here? And discovering what your purpose is, of why you're really here. A lot of us don't figure that out until we're in our mid-40s or later even. Very few of us can figure that out early because we're so busy trying to just survive the college, and then the early job, and then the apartment costs and all that kind of stuff. So it's really important but at one point it's important that you find that. So the name of the new book is
F Happiness. And it's the search for meaning in a world gone mad chasing happiness. So I'm not anti-happiness, but what I do want people to focus on is not chasing dopamine rushes, which is not a terrible thing. There's positive things that come from dopamine. If someone says, I love you, you get a rush of dopamine. That's not a terrible thing. Like, thank you for saying you love me. But we really need to find meaningfulness, because meaningfulness is long lasting, where happiness is fleeting. It is so fleeting that it's hard to even time it. It can just disappear so quickly. So, when we talk about happinesses, we can think about stuff like advertisers, right? Advertisers are constantly trying to sell us happiness, right? If you buy my product, if you believe my concept, if you consume this, you will be better looking, you'll be happier, you'll be smarter, you'll be more beautiful, you'll be more liked, more loved, whatever they're selling. So that again goes to, with being authentic, is if we're trying to emulate other people, which is what they're showing us in their advertisements, how are we being authentic? So that's a huge thing. And then I think the other thing is that we're facing, which is social media, right? Like, we're on social media now. It's awesome. Like, I love this. This is great. I think, Positive Talk Radio is a wonderful show. I like to do shows like this. I think it's a great use of social media, but there's a lot of stuff on social media that is curated moments of happiness. So people see this stuff like, oh, this family's so happy. And then they question, why am I not as happy as them? Why can't I have what they have? Why don't I have the car they have? Why am I not as skinny as they are? Why am I, and all these questions. And then we start to doubt ourselves. And that actually just creates, misery and pain and suffering, because we can't live up to the status quo that we see on social media. And a lot of that is just a facade, right? I mean, there's so many phony baloney things out there. And even when we were talking about celebrities, most celebrities are not monitoring their social media. They have someone who's paid to do that. They spit a quote out, or they say, hey, I think you should say this today. Okay, yeah, that's what I'm saying today. It's really pretty bizarre. So your favorite quote from a celebrity on social media might not actually be from them. Now, some do actually tweet their own stuff and send their own messages, but many do not. They're just too busy.
And or they don't have the talent to be able to come up with something that's real snappy that they can put on social media.
Yeah, well, think about it. Even our presidents. You go back to JFK, and everyone, and I look back at JFK, and I'm like, wow, he's awesome. But he had speechwriters. Ask not what this country can do for you, but what you can do for the country, kind of thing, right? Like, he didn't write that. He's known for it, and we admire him for saying that. But there's some person that we don't know of, or maybe it's in the archives. At least I don't know the person's name who actually wrote that. And it's like, wow, that's brilliant. Like, that's great motivation, but it's not that person. So, yeah.
No, he was just a mouthpiece.
Yeah.
Who said that? And a lot of times that's the way it goes. Have you ever heard of the concept of the be do have?
No.
This comes, I can't take credit for it. It comes from Neil Donald Walsh in Conversations with God. And what he says is that we have it all wrong. We think that if we do stuff, it's going to make us happy. And the happier we want to be, the more stuff we got to do. And we got to get out there and we got to put pressure on ourselves. And then maybe if we do everything and we do the house and we do the car and we do all this stuff, then we get to be happy. And when we have it all wrong, we need to be, rather than do stuff, we need to be. And we start off by naturally being happy. And then doing things that make us happy will give us happiness long term. I probably murdered the words.
We're taking this as a loose paraphrase at this point. So.
Very extremely loose.
Yes.
But that was the whole thing. It's like, well, and it makes sense to me that if you be something, then you don't have to go do something to be something because you're already that something. Did you see that was better?
Yeah. So kind of what you're touching on is what I call meaningfulness, right? So we do certain things and it transcends time, right? So if you think about happiness, like we have this thing called the hedonic treadmill, right? It's this psychological phenomenon where we adapt to positive or negative life events and eventually return to our baseline of happiness. So in other words, no matter what we do, we're going to return to our baseline. It's just inevitable. It's just who we are. So how do we get a good baseline, right? And baseline that's not based on happiness, that's based on meaningfulness. That's based on character. That's based on achieving your goals, living your life, leading with your heart, as you said earlier. So when we do that, we can transcend time. A story I like to share about that is, and this will take like 40 seconds if you could spare it.
I can spare it. You do it. Go for it.
Yeah. So Michelangelo in 1508 was painting the Sistine Chapel, and he was not happy about it at all. He was 68 foot up in the air. He's on rickety scaffolding. He's on his back. His back hurts. He possibly had stomach ulcers at the time. He's doing a fresco, so he's having wet plaster and paint dripping his eyes. He's painting by candlelight at times. He did this for 4 years. He did not even want this job. Pope Julius made him pretty much do this job. We know this, that he wasn't happy during this job because he wrote a letter to a friend and a poem about how miserable he was. But what is the benefit of this? Well, there was meaningfulness even though he wasn't happy because he was serving, at that time, he had strong faith in God. This was the theme of the Sistine Chapel, right? And he got to fulfill that. And he believed in art and he believed in creativity. And here we are 400 and some years later, 500 actually. I'm sorry, my math is terrible. I'm not a mathematician. 500 years later, and we're still talking about it. And it stands the test of time, right? It transcends time above him. Now, if it was based on happiness, he would never have taken that job. That's my point. Because it wasn't going to make him happy. It was hard work. Just like going to the gym is hard work. Going up, for average person, getting up and going to work is hard, right? Because not all of us are lucky, right? Like Kevin, Brichelle, myself, we're lucky. We get to do something we love. We get to have fun. We're laughing. We get to do this kind of stuff. There's other people who get up in the morning and they're like, oh gosh, it's another day. I can't wait till the 8 hours are over. Where, you know, I'm at the point where I'm like, oh, 8 hour day. This is awesome. Like, what am I going to encounter? You know, how, you know, am I going to have a good idea today? I'm not saying every day it's awesome, but because there's some days I'm frustrated where things just don't work for me, or I don't feel I did my best with a patient or something. But for the most part, you know, I'm living a meaningful life. So my baseline of happiness is not teetering all over the place. If things aren't perfect, I'm still pretty much even. And because I believe in what I'm doing.
And I'm willing to bet that your happiness is also not dependent upon current events and small things that happen in our day-to-day existence. Like when you're driving, you can be unhappy, but it doesn't define you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. The more in control we're in our life, about the more in control we are about our emotions and how we feel about ourselves, the less likely we are to lash out. So when you talk about like driving, I think of road rage. People who feel that their life is out of control and they're frustrated with the everyday thing, the news, little things that are going on that might not even affect their life truly, they're so frustrated. The minute something happens, they snap. Oh my gosh, you didn't give me ketchup with the fries. I'm going to whip the fries over the counter at you. You're a jerk, and blah, 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 blah. You know, someone didn't signal enough time. They're like, oh, this person's a, you know, XYZ. And, I'm going to, start riding their butt and stuff like that. It's like, no, like the more in control we are in our life, the less those little things mean to us. And we just kind of brush them off and go, they made a mistake. That's okay. I'm not saying that there's never someone who hasn't cut me off where I get upset. I just came off the expressway about an hour ago, but for the most part, I don't get irate because I like to believe I'm emotionally stable.
Well, and that's a skill that you learn over time, I think, because if being mindful of your surroundings and what's going on, a lot of people just float around and they're kind of half asleep. They're not paying attention to what's going on within their head or their heart, and they're just not paying attention. How do you help people? We need to take the last break, I promise, folks, because this is a great conversation. But how do you as a therapist encourage somebody to be more grounded, more status quo, and to not be flying around at every instance of when something happens that, oh, here we go again, and rather than just saying, hey, okay, that's cool, I'm okay. So we're talking with Shawn
Nowotnik.
Thank you.
Very good.
You're welcome. I've got it down.
She's been practicing Nowotnik, and he is a therapist. He has been all over the world. He does some great stuff. He's met some incredible people. And by the way, he is an incredible person all by himself. So we will return in just a second. So stay with us.
Last week, Brandon met a girl on a dating app. One day after work, he finally found the courage to ask her out. No answer. He started to panic. Was he being too pushy? Maybe it was too...
Hey, sorry I didn't respond. I was driving. I would love to go on a date. How does tonight sound?
Brandon tried to play it cool, but inside he knew a girl so smart, so responsible, she must be a keeper.
And welcome back to Positive Talk. You know, everybody looks at that and goes, how did you time it like that? Well, I'm just that good. Anyway, we're talking with Shawn Nowotnik. All right, Brichelle, hit me.
Nowotnik.
Thank you. And we're talking about, the work he does as a therapist, which is really, really important because, and so I wanted to ask you, how do you keep people happier in a constant frame of mind rather than all over and I know it has to do with their past and there are probably different reasons for everybody, but how do you teach people that happiness, really is an important thing in life, because and mindfulness and being clear about what's going on around you and being open to stuff and being kind to, that's a lot, and being kind to everybody.
Okay, so you're throwing a lot at me, but so
That's because you're just that good.
Okay, well, thank you. Wow, flattered. So, of course, every client is different, but there's two things I look at right away, and this is very common with the patients that I have, and that is they're usually depressed and they usually have anxiety, almost always. I cannot say that it's every client, but almost all of them. So two things I look at. So depression lives in the past. I shoulda, coulda, woulda. Why didn't I do this? So we're living in the past. So if we're living in the past, we can't be present, right? How are we being present? Because we're constantly be drawing back to, oh, if I was still with this girl, my life would be so much better. Oh, if that job didn't shut down, my life would have been so different. It's like, well, you're here now. What can we do now? So we focus on what can we do now. The other thing is that my clients also then are very anxious because that's future focused. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to. So we do, likelihoods like, well, how likely is it that the world's going to end tomorrow? It didn't end yesterday. It didn't end the day before. It didn't end the day before that, and there's things we can worry about and not worry about. So my thing is just to get them focused really on being mindful of right now. What can we do right now? And let's look at small incremental changes that we can make, right? I always tell people when they come into therapy, this is not a light switch. We don't flip it on, we don't flip it off. If it was that easy, I would have to charge $25,000 per patient, because it would be like, hey, you're cured, and flip the switch, you're cured, walk out the other door, bring in the next person. And, because I would have no repeat customers, right? Not that I try to drag out the process, mind you, I'm making light of it, but
conveyor belt therapy.
Yeah. So we're looking for incremental change, just small incremental change. So I ask them, what are some of your goals? What are some of the things you're struggling with? So we look at those kind of things and we break them down into manageable tasks, so that at least, and that's very solution focused. There's other things we do as well. I do some experiential therapy. So we look back at past traumas, and do stuff like sand tray therapy or EMDR or numerous other things that I do. So it's very unique to each client. There is no cookie cutter way. At least I don't believe in that model. I know there's some big franchise, psychological facilities that believe in the cookie cutter process. I don't believe in it, because I think we're all so uniquely different, that we have to be treated as such. And we have our own interpretation of what pain or trauma is. Trauma that somebody is maybe being raped or experiencing a death, or a near-death experience. Someone else, it could just be falling on their face on stage one time back in 5th grade and they can't get past it. So I don't judge and say whose trauma is worse than another's. It's just recognize that it is traumatic to them, and why, and how can we get past that? How can we grow, and be strong?
I've said this before on the show, but it bears repeating, because in 2003, I was doing a show in Gilda's house, which is a cancer support center, was the guest. And one of the gals was there, was a 4-time cancer survivor.
Oh,
4
wow.
times. And I said, you've experienced it all, from being well to being sick to being well and stuff. And I said, how do you keep an even keel about all this stuff? And she said, well, I've learned over time that if you have a foot in the past and another foot in the future, you're peeing on the present.
Mm.
So don't do that. All you have is today. Yesterday doesn't matter because it's gone. You can't do anything about yesterday. The future, it may never come. So take care of yourself today. Is that okay to say?
I think that's really great. And in fact, one of the lessons I know, I'll name drop here because I know you love him as much as I do, Burt Reynolds, right? So Burt Reynolds, when I got to work with Burt, it was an interesting experience, because as a kid, I remember being in my parents' station wagon, and this is going to date me, but back then station wagons they didn't have the real wood, but fake wood paneling on the side. And I was in the back going to football practice every night, and we'd drive by the cinema And it would always say Smokey and the Bandit. And I was like, oh, I really want to see this movie. Like, Burt Reynolds is so cool. And of course, Trans Ams were the car back then. And,
Yep.
he was the biggest box office draw at the time. So I always wanted to meet him. So when I met Burt, we talked about all different sorts of things. And I made sure that I wasn't like a fanboy and freaking out on him. I was very composed. I'd already been in Hollywood more than a dozen years. So I was very composed, and a friend of mine was representing him. But I got to sit with him. So going back to your story about being in the moment, I did get some alone time with Burt. And it's probably one of my favorite times in all my experience in Hollywood is that we got to have a one-on-one. He was struggling at the time. He was estranged from his son at the time, if I remember correctly. And I had just lost my son to suicide, and we were alone and just talking. And it was just two guys talking. It was like, no, he's not a big Hollywood star. I'm not someone trying to be some sort of big shot. And just two people talking as two fathers struggling with, how do you talk to your sons? And we started talking a little more then. And then we switched. Then we talked about Hollywood, and we talked about creativity, because we both are creative people. And Burt was telling me, and this goes back to being mindful and being in the moment, is Burt's like, Shawn, the accolades, the awards, they don't mean anything in the scheme of things. It's all about the work. It's all about the process. Just enjoy the process. And I was like, and I don't know how many people told me, he was not the first person who told me this, but that's the point when it finally sank in with me. Is like, I just need to enjoy this moment, not think about what am I going to parlay this moment into, not what I'm going to chase next. Just enjoy this moment, like this genuine moment I'm having with this person, this human connection, and just appreciate that. And then every job I do, I'm just going to appreciate the point of being in that job or that task or that creativity, and just really be in that moment, not thinking what's going to be the outcome, what am I going to benefit, or what could go wrong. Just embrace the moment. And I will say, I was one of the more beautiful moments I experienced in Hollywood, and just generally, kind person. And it changed me.
And he was a really cool man. Brachelle, you've been unusually quiet. You have any thoughts? You got a minute and a half.
No, it's okay. I've genuinely just been listening. I think it's powerful for people to hear, and for me and myself going through this day and age at my age, is all those things are not what people usually focus on. So I would ask you, Shawn, if there's something that you could say to our audience or our listeners, or even a group of people my age, of being able to believe in yourself enough to just to embrace every moment and move forward rather than to be afraid or have regrets, what would you tell them?
Cast away the fear of judgment. Fear of judgment is a huge thing that keeps us back. We come from tribes, right? And it was fit in or get out before. And we used to die in the old days if we didn't fit into our tribe. And now we don't have to worry about that as much. We do still have tribes. They're just different. They're social tribes. But to put away the fear of judgment, there's so many of us that are afraid of failure. And failure is a great lesson. We get wisdom from it, and we grow from it, and we get experiences from it. And Dale Carnegie wrote about this, right? And so I would say to those younger people is, cast away the fear of judgment, because so many people, a lot of people say that they're not I don't care what other people think. Yeah, that's not true. That's absolutely not true, because we all care, right?
Yeah.
Even myself, and I try not to let external factors affect my life. Even me, it still affects me. And I can tell you, even the greatest minds out there, it still affects them. It's just how much they allow it to affect them. Right? They think about it really quick, and they work through it and say, I'm not going to let this change what I'm going to do and what I feel right about. And then the other thing, Brachelle, I'd go back to what I was saying earlier, is what is your authentic self? Think about who you are, not who you're told you are, but who are you? Because so many people go through life, they're not sure who they are. And that's the most important thing. Who are you?
And you're the only one that can answer that question.
Yeah. It's not up to anybody else to decide that.
So, Shawn, I'm afraid we've run out of time. Tell us how to find you. If somebody wants to work with you, how do they do it?
So find me at ShawnLeonNowotnik.com, which is ShawnLeonNowotnik. You could type in my name and find me on Facebook. You could also find me at Blue Lavender, the clinic that I work at. I'm not sure if I have any openings, but I have an awesome team of people that I work with, and they would be able to help anyone who might be struggling in this area. And yeah, that's the best way to find me, and reach out. And I'm always interested in hearing what people have to say. And go to Amazon and buy the book, please. F Happiness.
Yes.
It will change your life. It will help you think about authenticity. It will help you think about vulnerability, and it will change your life. And if it doesn't, send me a message, and I'll do what I can to rectify that. But
if it doesn't, it's because they didn't read it.
Or the book is upside down.
Exactly. Shawn, thank you so much for being here. You're going to have to come back. Rochelle's going to handle that for us to make sure that happens. So,
yeah, for sure. Yeah. At
Thank
least
you so much for your time, Shawn.
I want to spend the whole time talking about the book, because I think that will have a tremendous amount of value. In any event, we've now gone over time, so now I'm in trouble. So everybody have a great day. Thanks for listening to this episode of Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Our purpose is to provide everyone with a positive, entertaining, and educational experience. I would love your feedback and comments about the show, including possible topics and great guest suggestions. Please email me at kevin@kmmedia.pro. And remember, be kind to one another, because each other's all we've got. That's Kevin@kmmedia.pro.